Bearing God's Name, Why Sinai Still Matters, Part 2. In this series, we're looking at thoughts from the book Bearing God's Name, Why Sinai Still Matters by Carmen Joy Imes. And in the first part, we saw how events at Sinai are framed in the text of the book of Moses in order to emphasize their significance. And that the Israelites first had to get to know Yahweh and build trust in him. So the question is, which we want to answer today, is what is changing at Sinai? Now, the Israelites have been wandering through the desert for 3 months until they reach Sinai. What comes next? What did they expect? What would you expect? Had Moses told them what Yahweh had said years before at the burning bush? Where he said, and God replied, I will be with you. This place will serve as the sign that I'm sending you. Then when you bring my people out of Egypt, you must serve God on this mountain. You must serve God on this mountain. Exodus 3:12, according to the 2001 translation. For Moses, the crucial part was, I will stand by you. The decisive factor was not who Moses was, but whose he was. In that situation, God therefore also revealed his name to Moses. This may not be a big deal to some, but it was back then. Most other gods were known under a pseudonym to keep people at a distance. But at Sinai, everything changes. At Sinai, the Hebrews discover who they are and, more importantly, whose they are. So Sinai is about worship. God's first instruction at Sinai lays the foundation, a new spiritual root, so to say. If we do not understand it, we may well misunderstand everything that follows. And Carmen Imes cites here Exodus 19, and according to Exodus 19, 3-6, according to the 2001 translation is, then Moses climbed the mountain of God, and God called to him on the mountain, saying, you must say this to the house of Jacob and report my words to the children of Israel. You've seen all that I've done to the Egyptians, and how I lifted you as on the wings of eagles and drawn you close to me. Now, if you listen to what I say and keep my sacred agreement, you'll be a special people to me that will be higher than all other nations. And because the whole earth is mine, you'll become my holy nation and a kingdom of priests. Now go and tell this to the children of Israel. So Yahweh begins with a description of his grace. Grace? Grace in the books of Moses? Perhaps we are too fixated on the laws and our understanding of laws today. And we will come to this back again at the end of this video. But this is about Yahweh's grace. He does not reproach the Hebrews for their behavior so far. He shows that it was his desire to bring them to him and not their merit. And then comes this Hebrew word in the text, segula, pronounced, And it's important to understand that. To fully grasp the significance of Israel's new status, I need to teach you my favorite, so Carmen Imes' favorite Hebrew word, segula. In the NIV, it's appropriately translated as treasured possession. But it helps if you understand the wider use of the word. Segula appears 8 times in the Old Testament. The related ancient languages of Ugaritic and Akkadian both employ an equivalent word to refer to someone who joins a special status in relation to the king, a covenant partner who is especially treasured and entrusted with greater responsibility. And in the Aramaic translations of the Old Testament, the Segula is described as beloved. They are to be a kingdom of priests, serving as his ambassadors to the nations, and a holy nation set apart for God's purposes. In my all-time favorite book, also this is from Carbon Imes, The Mission of God, and The Mission of God is written by Christopher J.H. Wright. He emphasizes that Israel was chosen in order to bless the nations. And he says, they have a role that matches their status. Their status is to be a special treasured possession. The role is to be a priestly and holy community in the midst of the nations. So the law of Moses was a gift for Hebrews. That shows their answer and how Moses spoke about it, or later Psalm 119. Other gods did not answer people. You never really knew what they wanted or why they seemed angry. They had to be appeased. Yahweh is very different. He even speaks directly to the Hebrews. He says clearly what he wants and what is not acceptable. The law is like a fence that protects them and helps them to live a prosperous life within it. But now, one more note on the word law which we use in this context. The English word law is both too narrow and too misleading to accurately translate the Hebrew word Torah. It is better translated as instruction. Torah encompasses a wider scope of material than just laws, and law is not the best word to describe what the Torah contains. So let's come, if law is already not a good translation, but it should be instruction, let's come to the 10 commandments. Really? Commandments? Perhaps most of you, or everyone, knows the famous 10 commandments. They are written, you can find them in the Bible, in Exodus 34, 28 and other verses. So the 10 commandments are found in the Bible, but the Bible never call it like that. Excuse me, I wasn't wrong. So you find it in the Bible, but the biblical text itself never calls it 10 commandments. Let's see what's here in the interlinear translation of Exodus 34, verse 28. And you see here the tablets and the words, the 10 of the covenant. So this word, this Hebrew word, dibeh, that is used. It's not commandments. Actually, what is used is the Hebrew word dabar, and it can also mean matter as well as thing. This is fitting because it contains more than just commandments, as we will see in a moment. But let's have a look at the second misconception that is often encountered. How many pens were there, and how were they described, or what was written on it? There are many images of that on the internet. I took one from the Jehovah's Witnesses publications from 2020, so pretty recently. I did it because of my personal background in the past, and because they always emphasize how thoroughly they investigate and do research for their pictures. So here in the publication, Jehovah's Witnesses, Our Christian Life and Ministry, the meeting workbook from August 2020, page 7, you see this here. and you see 2 tablets and few words on it. So how many words do you see? Okay. Now let's compare what is in the text. And the text reads, "And Moses turned and he went down from the mountain, and the 2 tablets," okay, that's right, "of the covenant document," and the word which is used here is edut, "were in his hand. Tablets inscribed on both sides, inscribed on front and back." So that's Carmen's Imes translation. So, okay, what we see is here 2 tablets, but very few words. In Hebrew, the 10 words, or you may know them as 10 commandments, only consists of 171 words. So that's much more than the few ones you see here. So a lot of it must be on the backside. Or, well, it's just an illustration. More importantly, however, we also find here the idea that 2 tablets were necessary because the text would not have fitted on one, but this is not the case. Why were they 2 tablets? So rather, the Hebrew word edut, which was used, which is translated here as covenant deed, has a special meaning and is found in a similar way in other languages of the ancient Near East. When it came to such documents, the tablet and an exact copy were made. So the document and an exact copy. If it was a treaty between 2 peoples, 2 nations, a copy of each was placed in the temple of their own god, so that these gods could watch over its observance. In this case, however, the covenant was between Yahweh and Israel. So both tablets, which were identical, so one and the copy, both tablets were therefore placed in the sanctuary. But let's come to a third common misunderstanding. The 10 commandments or words can be clearly divided into 2 groups of laws. One that concerns God and one then that concerns people, other humans. However, this is not an adequate view of these instructions. Even when Israelites violated a commandment from the second group against people, they spoke of sinning against God. For example, in 2 Samuel 12:13 or in Psalm 51 verse 4. So, as Carmen Imes writes, in the covenant community, every part of his life is an expression of worship and loyalty to the God who has committed himself to these people. How they treat others reveals their heart toward God. So, do the 10 commandments now apply forever because they are even literally carved in stone? Right before that, before the 10 commandments, Yahweh speaks of who they are addressed to. And it's this: I am Yahweh, our God. I am Yahweh, your God. I have freed you from the house of slavery in Egypt. You may. That's Exodus 20, verse 20. So these words are often used as a specific, in a specific ancient context and vocabulary. It also indicates that it was for them. And they were also never communicated to other nations. So from this, Carmen Imes and many other arguments concludes, the commands in this ancient context are for the Israelites alone. The Torah was a gift to Israel, the people of Yahweh. We will come back to that point at the end of this series. So, therefore, it makes the most sense to read the first 3 sentences together as the first word. And this is also shown by a form of writing things, the chiasm, which is used here in Exodus 20, but also in Deuteronomy 5. And you will see it best here on this picture from Carmen Im's books. So if you read it in the form, we have first part, I am Yahweh your God, verse 2. Then we have B, you must not have other gods, verse 3, which is plural in Hebrew. Then we have the central piece, C, you must not make an image, that's singular. Then we switch back to plural, and you must not bow down to them or worship them, which is like B prime. So it corresponds to this part, the upper B part. And then we're back to the A part. I, Yahweh, your God. Verse 5b. So if you see the symmetry here, A, B, C, B prime, A prime, it's like one word. So you can even describe it that the point of images is worship here, and the means of worship are images. And there is a clear word, an instruction for Yahweh's people. So this brings us to the second commandment, from which the title of Carmen Im's book is derived. And she has a nice chapter where she writes, it's an invisible tattoo, the second command or word. And according to her translation of Exodus 27, it is, you must not bear or carry the name of Yahweh your God in vain, for Yahweh will not hold guiltless one who bears or carries his name in vain. So many translations render this differently, because the translators and theologians thought that this would otherwise make no sense. But what does it look like if you try to let the Bible explain itself exegetically? The very next context is Exodus 28, which reads, so Aaron shall have the names of the sons of Israel on his breastplate for the arbitration, as a constant reminder before Yahweh when he enters the sanctuary. Exodus 28:29. So, and the high priest also has a name on his forehead, and the name is Kodesh La Yahweh. So this means holy, Kodesh, and the letter Lamed is in front of Yahweh, which means belonging to Yahweh. And the reason is the letter Lamed before Yahweh is used here, as it was also used elsewhere in ancient seals to indicate ownership. So she writes, the 12 gemstones indicate that the high priest represents the entire nation before Yahweh. The medallion on his forehead indicates that he is Yahweh's authorized representative for the nation, to the nation. Now think back to the dramatic declaration of Exodus 19, when Israel first arrived at Mount Sinai. There God bestowed titles on his people like treasured possession, kingdom of priests, holy nation. As his treasured possession, Israel's vocation, the thing they were born to do, is to represent their God to the rest of humanity. They function in priestly ways, mediating between Yahweh and everyone else. They are set apart for his service. And she continues, by looking at Aaron, every Israelite is reminded of their calling as a nation. Just as he is set apart for service, holy, that's the meaning of holy here, so are they, a holy nation, set apart for service. At Sinai, Yahweh claims this nation as his very own and releases them to live out their calling. That calling is to bear Yahweh's name among the nations, that is to represent him well. So in short, the first two commandments say, or two words say, first, worship only Yahweh, and the second is, represent him well. This now makes it clear why the term law as a translation for the Hebrew Torah is inadequate and even misleading. It is not a collection of regulations and laws in our modern sense, but character formation for his holy nation. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in part 3 then. Goodbye.